Hello, everyone, and welcome to Network First in the GCC region. We're going to wait a few minutes for the attendees to join. In the meantime, please, if you want to drop a comment on the chat indicating where you're joining from, and yeah, feel free to share your LinkedIn and any other information you deem appropriate, and we'll start in 5 minutes from now.
We're still getting a few people entering the room, so we'll give it a few more minutes.
Yes. Please mute yourself upon entry if possible so that we don't have any background noise. Let's wait for 3 more minutes and we can get started.
I'm seeing some familiar faces I've been seen in a while. So again, I've been outside of Qatar for a couple of months, so it'll be good to connect with everybody again.
Hello, Charlie Borrell, joining from Ireland. Again, feel free to drop a comment on the chat. We'll have also a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, but feel free to pose any questions throughout the session. We'll bring them up. Perfect. So we can get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining to the webinar on Network First in the GCC region. We can start with a quick introduction. My name is Francisco Marin. I'm the founder and CEO at Cognitive Talent Solutions. I come originally from Spain, but I'm based in Palo Alto, California. I used to work at IBM for 5 years as a business analytics leader, and I've been working for 8 years with Cognitive Talent Solutions in the organizational network analysis space. And I'm one of the founding members of the Network First Manifesto, where I've been involved since its inception in August of 2025. So super excited to be sharing with you today the Network First approach and the Network First Manifesto, and to solve any questions that you have. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Great. Thanks, Francisco. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Wael Khoury. I'm the managing director and founder of Lopez Khoury and Associates, Human Capital Consultants. We're based in Doha, Qatar. And I also head, of course, and work with Francisco on the Network First Manifesto and approach. And we're excited to discuss this very forward-thinking way of looking at organizational structuring and working together, especially in the region. And we look forward to an interactive session, your questions, and your ideas as well. So it's great to be here.
Amazing. So let's get started. Just want to make sure one moment here that we're recording. Yeah, we're fine. So let's get started over here. And this is the agenda for today's session. Basically, we're going to start with an overview of the Network First Manifesto. Then we are going to provide an overview of the Network First approach or methodology, including an ongoing case study. And then Wael is going to talk about why the network first approach is particularly relevant in the GCC region. We're going to have a 15-minute Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but please, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop a comment on the chat, or feel free to raise your hand and we can solve the questions on the go. Thank you very much. And we can start with the Network First Manifesto overview. So let's start with the concept of network first. The context of the emergence of the concept of network first, basically, it's one of the key factors is how we are seeing as a society that AI is disrupting the way we operate, right? Whether it is through the advent of generative AI or AI agents, we are seeing that companies are struggling to adapt to this level of change. Some companies are shrinking, some companies are going through reorganizations. Sometimes the people that remain in those organizations that adopt AI do not necessarily have a higher level of engagement. But this is just kind of like the beginning, right, of the changes that we're going to see unfolding. Here in Silicon Valley, there has been for a number of years a lot of buzz about the concept of the AGI or the singularity. AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. And this is basically a level of development of AI where AI can hit certain milestones and start improving itself without human supervision, and in a way kind of like escape our control, right? So we know that AI is augmenting its development exponentially, and the question is like, when are we going to reach a point where we are no longer able to ensure that AI is aligned with what we want it to do, or in a way it kind of like escapes our control. And this event is known as the singularity. So this singularity, or the advent of AGI, in the Network First Manifesto, we don't see it necessarily as a destination, but as a fork or bifurcation. We understand that AI is going to amplify whatever framework is predominant in society. And we understand that at the current time, the predominant framework in society, especially when it comes to work, it might be excessively centralized or siloed, right? And what we're trying to find with the Network First Manifesto is what is the right level of balance between centralization and decentralization to create a way of working that amplifies human connection and collaborative freedom. We understand that in an era where AI can virtually automate anything that we can do, what defines us as humans is ultimately the ability to connect with each other and to experience human connection. And therefore, we should create and design systems, tools, and frameworks that amplify human connection and collaborative freedom. The concept of collaborative freedom here is very important. Collaborative freedom means working on something you're passionate about with people that resonate with you, having freedom over your schedule. So this is something it is sometimes we experience as entrepreneurs or freelancers, not as easy to experience in large multinationals. But we're trying to find that way of work that can amplify this human connection and collaborative freedom, and we'll share now the progress that we've made. So the Network First Manifesto basically started as a community initially of about 300 members back in August 2025, and then it has grown to about 600, 700 members nowadays. And back in August 2025, we came up with this co-created manifesto that included 8 principles. These principles talk about humans being social beings at our core, the importance of social capital, the importance of networks as a powerful framework to define the future of work. Because let's remember, networks are the substrate that power both decentralized communities and rigid hierarchies. A hierarchy at the end of the day is just a collection of nodes and edges interacting with each other, right? So we understand that every single wave of technology that has hit Silicon Valley and then the rest of the world had to do with networks. The internet had to do with networks, social media had to do with networks, blockchain had to do with networks, and artificial intelligence in a way has to do with the advent of neural networks as a way of powering them, right? So we don't know 100% how the future of work is going to look like, but we know that it will have to do with networks, with decentralization, with communities, with automation, and with artificial intelligence. And then, like, some of the principles have here some component of network science, and we have the principle of collaborative freedom. So this was kind of like the inception of the community. And then nowadays, as I mentioned, we have about 600, 700 members from about 300 to 400 different companies. This is a very, very diverse global community. We have already several members that have joined regions like Qatar, Egypt, Dubai, but also here in the United States, South America, Europe, Africa. It's a very, very global community, both in terms of region, in terms of role, in terms of level of experience. We got consultants, entrepreneurs, multinational executives, freelancers, artists. And it's a community of people that are passionate about networks, passionate about the future of work, and they want to engage in this collective, decentralized process of exploring what a better way of work looks like. Just to clarify, this at the moment it's a non-commercial initiative. There are no fees involved to join. Everyone is welcome to join, and we'll share now a link for anybody that hasn't joined yet that wants to be involved. And the initial members that join had the title of founding member. The other members have founder, but there is no hierarchy whatsoever. It's pretty decentralized, and I will explain now how we organize ourselves. So let's start with the network first approach that will explain both how the Network First Manifesto community is organizing itself, and then like a specific example on how we are running these in my own company, Connected Talent Solutions, which is one of the first 5 companies that is piloting this methodology. So basically, the original experiment that we ran in the Network First community was known as the 30-day impact project. The premise here was that we were wondering if we were able to map the areas of interest of the members and the skills or areas of expertise and availability to join online or asynchronously. If we fed all that information to an AI model, would the model be able to organize people to work in a decentralized manner, right? So we map all this information through Google Forms, and then we fed it to an LLM, and the LLM configured 8 teams of 8 people to work together for 30 days on specific deliverables, right? So that experiment was pretty much a disaster, basically. Like only half of the teams were able to deliver something at the end of the 4 weeks. Some of them were not even able to agree on having a meeting. But what we noticed is that those teams where we had kind of like somebody that was passionate about the topic being proposed, they had better performance than others. And that's how we moved initially from what we call the AI-led model to the member-led model, right? And we were discussing these findings at the monthly gatherings, which we started calling network convergencies. So with that member-led model, basically the way it works, it evolved over time into the 8C framework that you see on the screen. Basically, it consists of 8 phases. We have a calling phase where people are called basically to work on something they're passionate about, and they submit a proposal to be ratified by the community. In the case of the Network First Manifesto, that proposal looks something like this, where basically you can submit a proposal through a Google form and you put your name, your proposal, the proposal description, and then that proposal is available through this decentralized voting tool for voting by the community. These proposals are reviewed at a monthly gathering called Network Convergence. That's where we enter already into the converging phase. This network convergence typically lasts between 1 to 2 hours, and we do it the second Monday of each month. So at the network convergences, members defend their proposals. They're open for voting for the following 7 days. And in this case, if a proposal gets 25 or more votes with 50% or more majority of for votes instead of against or abstain, then that proposal is ratified. When that proposal is ratified, then we enter what we call here the catalyzing phase. That member becomes a project catalyst. And the goal of the project catalyst basically is to manage the collective effort from the members to, in a way, lead that initiative, right, to produce certain outcomes. So once the project catalyst is defined, we open the project in the Slack workspace. You can see here we have multiple projects that start with the hashtag project. So we have different projects here going on. And each of these projects is led by a project catalyst, who is the member that originally submitted the proposal. Once the channel is open, we enter what we call the cohering phase. During the cohering phase, basically it means that any member from the community is free to join the project, and then sometimes some of these projects have very clear what they want to do. Sometimes some of these project teams they define the scope in a way during the cohering phase, right? They have a high level of uncertainty. But once they define the scope, basically they enter the crafting phase, where they start meeting on a weekly basis, typically for 10 to 15 weeks. Typically, they meet during 30 minutes or 1 hour, and there is a lot of asynchronous work on Slack and other platforms. And then, after a few weeks, they start condensing the outcomes that they produce. Sometimes those outcomes have to do with specific technologies. Sometimes they have to do with specific documentation or presentations. But these outcomes are condensed, documented, and then they are circulated across the community for feedback. And eventually, these outcomes are crystallized during the crystallizing phase, which means they're integrated into the structure of the community itself, right? So, for example, the name of the AC framework or words like Project Catalyst or Network Convergence came through an initiative called Network First Poetics that explore alternative nomenclature to everyday words that we use, like all hands meetings or project manager, right? And propose alternative nomenclature that was embedded into a glossary that was circulated with the community and eventually was crystallized into the structure of the community itself. So this process of creating common symbols, creating common nomenclature is very strong in terms of creating ownership. And yeah, these are basically the 8 phases of the 8C framework, which is a big part of how we're implementing Network First nowadays. And we combine that with a series of practices, including network guiding to provide orientation to new members, network nurturing, basically to recognize the contribution of members on a regular basis, and a series of positive activities, network rituals to ensure that everything works smoothly. And then also another important component of the network first approach has to do with performing organizational network analysis. Organizational network analysis, or ONA, is a method to map and analyze the informal interactions that exist within an organization. This can be done through online surveys, which is known as active ONA, or through passive data sources like Slack or email, which is known as passive O&A. So a very important part of the network first approach consists in mapping constantly these network interactions, typically in a way where we don't show any individual names, but we can run a series of micro interventions uh, based on the activities that have been agreed by the community, and we can understand if there are any regions, for example, or groups that are being disconnected. And this is the purpose actually of this particular webinar, right? Doing the initial active O&A analysis that we performed within the Network First community, we realized that there were two specific regions, specifically the GCC region and the APAC region, that we were getting members in the community, but because of the time zone difference, because of different factors, they were not as engaged with the community as the Latam, European, or North American communities. And that's why basically we said, well, let's organize a webinar, let's explain the approach, and let's use that as an opportunity for this community to be more engaged. And I wanted to then show a quick example on how we've been running passive organizational network analysis within the Network First community. In this case, we analyze the API from Slack, and we're able to see basically how different projects were interacting. We're measuring the level of activity by project, right? And again, all this we do it without really identifying names, just to provide an overview of how the network works on a regular basis. So now I would like to go with that to one of the pilots that we're running actually with my own company, with Connected Talent Solutions. We're one of the 5 companies that are starting to pilot this methodology. This started actually just a few weeks, so it's a pretty early days. We're already seeing some interesting things, right? So just for context, CTS is organizational network analysis vendor, headquartered in Palo Alto, a group of about 50 people global level, but we run this pilot within the global extended team, consisting of different consultants and ambassadors, which accounts for about 30 members. And basically, I will explain how we implement it. First of all, just replicating what we did with the Network First community, we enable a form to submit proposals, right? And then so far, in the first couple of weeks, we had a total of 7 proposals. 2 of them are currently open, and 5 of them have been already ratified. So these are proposals basically about things that members of the CTS team feel passionate about, they want to work on. And typically, if they would work on these projects, they would either interact directly with me as the founder or with the CTO. They would have one-on-one meetings, but there wouldn't be a forum where any member can join on a regular basis, right? However, now with this approach, the community can ratify these projects, in this case with 10 votes or more, with 51% for votes during 7 days. And anybody that wants to be part of it can be part of it. So then basically we also run an active organizational network analysis. The active organizational network analysis typically consists in an online survey where employees provide their consent to participate in this survey, and then basically they have a series of informal interactions, sharing information, technical support, personal support, inspiration, and they can nominate the peers they interact with by selecting people from the drop-down menu, or just typing the name they're thinking about and seeing the names that match that description. And they can nominate up to 20 people, at least one person per interaction. And that's how basically we come up with this network that you see here. We don't reveal the names, but each node is a member, and depending on the level of influence, they can be central, intermediary, or peripheral. And I can see when I drag one that shows me in an interactive manner how the person can influence others. Whereas if I try with a one that is less influential, it shows me that those people are not as influential, right? Typically, when large multinationals do this type of analysis, we can integrate elements of generative AI and agentic AI as well to interact with the network in real time. And I might be able to show an example in short, but this is basically what we saw in these early stages, is that, as you can see, there is excessively dependency on some central nodes. And what we are looking with implementing this approach right now is basically to increase the level of collaboration across the global extended team and make sure that they have opportunities to connect directly with other members, and that way basically increase the overall engagement and productivity of the team. Just for reference, another project that we are running right now as part of the Network First company pilot project has to do, is implemented in a company in Brazil called Odilon. They have about 2,000 people, but they're running this pilot with um, department of 120 people within the company. These are typically companies that already have certain level of exposure to either holacracy, teal organization, or some type of decentralized systems. But now also we are in the process within the community of documenting something called the Network First Codex, which is going to be kind of like an open foundation where we're going to relinquish any IP that might have been generated. And we are going to basically give this like a gift to the world without any attribution needed, so that any company that wants to create certifications, courses, consulting practices, or technologies related to Network First can do so without any concern about IP royalties or other stuff. This is a super exciting moment now to join the community. If you're interested, I'm gonna drop a link in the comments where you can join. It's just a quick setup form, and as you see, basically we are working here to create a way of work that sits at the intersection of network analytics, decentralized community management, a bit of blockchain as well, because the decentralized voting includes blockchain technology, even if you don't need to create a MetaMask, you can log in only with your email, and also artificial intelligence, right? So, and the goal here is to amplify human connection and collaborative freedom. I'll pause it there. Want to see if there are any questions so far before we proceed with while explaining why this approach is particularly relevant for the GCC region. I think we have some.
We got a question in the chat, Francisco. Yeah.
Yeah.
Giovanni's asking about using the 5D fiber cross engagement.
Hmm. I'm actually not familiar
Interesting.
with that model. Are you familiar? Well,
Not in too much depth, I guess, right? I guess
Ike, you want
Giovanni,
to unmute yourself and elaborate a bit more on your question?
Sure.
that would be
Hi,
great. Yeah.
Francisco. Hi, Wael. My name's
Hi.
Amanda. Hi. I interned at IBM in the summer after my freshman year, and I got to intern for the head of sales, who was based in Michigan, and he sold to the big three automotive. And
Right. Right.
his whole philosophy was building networks five deep and five across relationships. So when you
Yeah.
said IBM, that's the first thing I thought of when you were
Oh,
presenting this, because I remember I used to have to come in at 4 in the morning during the summer with him to prepare his index cards. That's how they did sales back then.
interesting, interesting. Yeah, IBM has been a
Amazing.
very pioneering company. I was not directly exposed to this particular model, but a very foundational experience that happened at the time that I was working at IBM. I was certified in CCMA Black Belt by IBM while I was working there, and in a way, I could see Lean and Six Sigma as a methodology that started in the manufacturing industry and then spread across different industry and set a new standard for the way of working, right? Then there was the second wave, which we also experienced at IBM, which was the wave of agile methodologies that in a way they drank
Yes.
from lean principles, right? And some of the practices are very similar, like the 5 why analysis or value stream maps, etc. But an interesting aspect, and by the way, I had the opportunity to interact directly with some of the original signatories of the Agile Manifesto, and they were sharing their experience, etc. Right? But um, one of the things that we are trying to do differently with regards to the Lean Six Sigma or Agile movements is that while, for example, in the case of the Agile movement, they started with a manifesto as well back in 2001 in Utah, signed by, I believe it was 17 or 18 software developers, right? Um, that manifesto was very aspirational, but was not detailed enough for companies to apply Agile in a completely self-service manner. Whereas later there were other frameworks like Scrum and others that built certifications and different paid offerings, but companies didn't really have a strong open foundation to do this by themselves without going through an intermediary, right? So what we're trying to do now with this Network First Codex is to create kind of like a free manual, free guide, so that any company that wants to explore these, they can either implement it as it is, or just create their own version, or just create something completely different, right? But in a way that there can still be paid offerings in terms of tooling, consulting practices, technologies in the market, but still companies have an easy way to implement this by themselves. So yeah, there are many movements out there that have to do with decentralization and networks. You got the network state, you have the FITO network, you have I'm thinking about teal organizations, holocracies, right? The Octopus movement, and others. But yeah, we really have a strong focus on doing things that are actionable, that are relevant in the current context, and produce these outcomes that we can share with the world as a gift. And engage, lead by example, and use those methodologies in the way that we manage our own community.
No, it's a beautiful model. So I'm glad I joined today.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
And again, Giovanni, based on what you're talking about, obviously there is that link there in terms of how these networks are working, right? And the models there, right? Based on my experience or light knowledge of, kind of the 5D, 5 across, obviously in the Middle East, I see, right, there's a lot of depth, right? But I think the issue is the collaboration and working across different networks, right? And not just in a matrix kind of a way, right? But in the very dynamic ways that matrices and networks work together, I think, right? So there is definitely application there. There is overlap in the thinking that goes on here as well. I really
Yeah.
understand define who has access to what influence do they have, how does collaboration work, what is the effectiveness of the communication that happens across networks to get where things are done. And again, I would expect to see differences in how networks in a general way operate, in different regions of the world culturally, based on just experience, based on how organizations have typically matured, so it's very interesting to kind of have that link between these two different
No,
ideologies.
this is a very beautiful model. It's kind of like open source coding for the world, except from a networking perspective.
Exactly, absolutely. A very nice way of putting it. I like that.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, actually.
It could be useful, well, if based on your experience working in the GCC region, if you could explain, based on your perspective, why this model is particularly relevant in the GCC region, where are some of the peculiarities, right, that we might find.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll take a few minutes to talk about kind of how I see things in terms of the application to the Middle East, based on my experience of being here almost 20 years now in the region as well, and kind of saying, okay, fine, the whole region is trying to modernize and find new ways of working. And this is what we do as part of our general human capital practices, kind of think of forward ways of thinking, leading practices, but make it relevant and applicable to the context where we live in terms of the region, the company cultures, and even the ways of maturity between ways of working across KSA versus Kuwait versus UAE and Qatar are still very different, right? So there is a different application that happens, but everywhere. So I appreciate Francisco kind of coming in together and kind of talking about this. We're starting one of the first conversation around the Network First Manifesto and ONA as well, and how it works across the GCC, because we see across the GCC, that the org chart that we are usually um, kind of used to, it shows authorities, right? But the authorities in the boxes, and there's different ways of looking at organizational structures, right? But it doesn't always show, not just authority, but doesn't really show how things get done. It doesn't show exactly the influence that is there. Who are the people affecting decisions, and how work gets done in a general sense within a hierarchy or within an organization, right? So really the idea is to emphasize the connections that are there, the quality of the connections, who's getting things done as well. And across the GCC, we see this, right? Because it is very much a culture which is very network driven, right? We know this for people who worked or lived in the region for a long time. Networks are extremely important, right? Culturally, in ways of dealing day to day. And it's about translating that into really more of a formalized way of working, I think, right? Which kind of fits into naturally the theories that we're talking about today. How decisions are made, how does trust, build within communities, within organization itself, and across different networks, right? So the issue is not that there's a lack of network, is how are we designing organizations for the future that build around this way of working, correct, from the start? Or how do we refashion organizations into this new way of working? And what are the benefits of doing that, right? Moving away from rigid hierarchies, moving away from these reporting lines, and moving away from bureaucracies and centralized control, which is very typical that we see across this area as well. It'll be great to hear from the audience or people who are listening in. Exactly right. And you guys can think this for yourselves, right? Who in your organization is the person who really everybody goes to? And it could be, the head of the organization, or it could be somebody who is, head of a department. But there are people who are unofficially the go-to person, right? And why is that so? Is it because they're the most senior? Are they the ones that have the most influence? And everybody has that kind of these key nodes, these key people within their organizations today. And that kind of affects, the network itself. How do these organization functions and how do they operate to get things done? Because many organizations don't even recognize these individuals formally, right? But we know they're there and they have a strong influence of how organizations are shaped, the directions they take, how decisions are being made. And this is just a bit of food for thought, and be interesting to hear people who can kind of, shed some input on that from their own experience as well. Now, the other point I wanted to highlight again is that, within the GC I've seen across, just consistently is that, you've got your kind of tied into that same thought that you've got your formal organizations on paper, right? And then you've got your network, how things actually move, how things actually work, and they're not always aligned, right? And that sometimes results in bottlenecks or disconnected teams or talent that's not being used. And really, when you go through this organizational network analysis, you understand the influence and the impact of everybody there, who relates to who, and how does work actually get done. And it's a very fluid situation that changes. It's never going to be the same for long periods of time as well. And there's different factors that come in to do that. And with that, you can understand, how, what decisions are being stopped, what decisions get bottlenecked. Are leaders overloaded or not? Is there slowdown in execution? So again, are leaders really just leading, or are they just really looking, are becoming kind of pit stops for everybody to, okay, fine, give the go ahead or the thumbs down on certain decisions or not? So, and as networks and organizations work more virtually and they work across different areas and geographies, it becomes very, very important to have this flexible structure and different way of working to get things done in our modern world. I think in the GCC specifically, there are multinational workforces. We understand that the workforce composition in the GCC is very different than in Europe or the Americas, for example, correct? Or maybe in Asia. Yes, not just because they're multinational, but also, you've got nationals versus expats. You've got cultural layers as well that are in there as well. And that creates, whether you like it or not, certain different networks within the organizations themselves, right? And how do you apply this analysis to our local context is going to be very, very interesting and really good to see, I think, as we start applying this methodology across the region, based on how companies typically work, or governments typically work, in Qatar or KSA or the UAE, right? Again, it's really about how do we give access to everybody in the organization, influence to make key decisions, to get the results done. The other aspect I'd like to talk about is, again, when we go back to nationalization, we know nationalization is an extreme priority and becoming more and more so in Qatar. It's way ahead, obviously, in KSA, in UAE, etc. Right? So, organizations want to hire the best talent that they can, but how do they integrate those? How do they work with nationals in terms of giving, access to the right training? How do they make sure that nationals and expats work clearly together culturally? How do we increase nationalization targets in a way that keeps the organization functioning in an efficient way and through this new methodology, right? So the idea is that organizations need to be very intentional about integrating expats and nationals together in an organization to function in a network typical kind of way. And we're already seeing challenges of that when organizations typically function in a hierarchical structure. And it'll be interesting and challenging to see how they would function in a network organization. And that's something to be cool to see in terms of our experimentation, I think, as we implement this methodology throughout the region bit by bit. Um, I think in general, ONA, really, when you put it down to the bottom line is, what really happens in your company, right? What does it really show? It really shows, okay, fine. It shows who people trust. It shows who people rely on. It shows where the influence and the key decisions sit within the organization, which may not be what is actually documented on a paper. And that's something that really for you to kind of reflect and see, okay, fine, what is the actual situation in your own organizations? and how do we understand the benefits of working through a network system, and how do we implement that within our current organizations if we're setting it up from scratch as something, or if you're trying to implement that in an organization that has been around for 20, 30, 50 years, or a government sector department, or are we looking at family businesses that have been around for 50 years that are very traditional in certain ways of working, right? So it'd be interesting to see and kind of convince individuals of the benefits of doing this way of organizing companies. And the GCC provides a very interesting and I think a very ripe context, I think, to experiment and implement this new way of working. I think that's a bit important. I would say probably, I mean, look, I would say if you look at case studies that we would want to look at, I think for me, what's interesting, I think the government sector definitely is something to look at, right? There's all the vision, there is the funding. But I think in general, across everything that we've seen, what I've seen at least, right, is always a problem in execution, right? How do you get these plans to be operationalized, right? There's a lot of silo work that happens across not just government entities, but also in many large corporations. Collaboration is done very formally. You work through committees and you work through formalized structures, right? And we know how cumbersome that could be as well. So I think government sector is very ripe to kind of have this network way of working and experiment with it. I think it's really, really an interesting place to look at. And networks already exist there, right? How do you take that and flip it into a much more agile structure? I think that's important. Um, I think when you were talking about the five across and five deep, I think that's very interesting because yes, depth is there, authority is there, influence is there, but I think I've seen it across many different things you were saying, right? Is that the collaboration is not always there. The communication cross channels, cross departments is a bit lacking from what I've seen through my history of working in this region. And this is a great way that will help kind of alleviate some of that. Um,
Well, I
I
was
think,
receiving some messages from the members mentioning
yeah.
that during the presentation, somehow like some of the tools like the proposal tool or the Slack channel were not actually visible during the presentation, only the slides. Was that the case that only the AC framework slide was being shown, but not the actual tool?
It may have been Francisco. I don't know if you want to present that a bit maybe as
I
well.
was wondering, would it make sense to spend like 2, 3 minutes just providing those visualizations? And since you're elaborating on the use of organizational network analysis, we could also elaborate a bit
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the ONA use cases and some of the AI capabilities as well to show the potential, right? And then we can have like the Q&A sessions. Unless there is any other aspect of the relevance of Network First in GCC that we haven't covered so far.
No, look, I think for us, for me at least, I'd like to end up with saying that, obviously the GCC, we know the GCC has always been very much relationship driven. It's really about, this is something that's not very new to us at all. It's how do we, scale the relationships? How do we measure those relationships, the strength of those? How do we put scientific, understanding towards all that? And how do we intentionally build a network organization to make sure it's very effective in driving the results that are there? So I think this is where the future of work in general is. And I think in the region as well, it's something that is a very ripe, area to kind of build upon this. And I think we'll benefit a lot from working through this network analysis, doing the network analysis and understanding how do we develop network organizations. I think it might be very good actually to kind of put up a bit on like you said the samples that we were talking about, Francisco, and we can kind of show on Slack kind of how that works because it wasn't showing during the presentation. I think when you
Sure.
were
And by the
showing
way,
that,
I
yeah,
have I have dropped. Hopefully, you can see now the website of the Network First Manifesto.
that
Um,
shows that, yeah.
so I just wanted to mention that I have dropped a link on the comments where you can complete the sign up form to join the community at any time. But yeah, just to provide basically this is would be an example of the proposal form that we use to submit the proposals in the Network First Manifesto, and we created a similar one for CTS, right, where you can see basically the people can join and indicate the name, the proposal title, and the description, and then the proposals are basically reflected in the case of the Network First Manifesto community. This is an example of the page, so you see how it looks like. Just let it load for a moment. Oh, I might have to actually, oh, here's it. Here it is. So you see like there are different proposals. This is powered by blockchain technology, but you don't need to create a MetaMask or use any cryptocurrency. You just have to log in with your email. And basically the proposals are open for 7 days. If they reach 25 votes or more, then they are ratified. This, for example, is the last proposal. They got 28 votes from the Network First Codex. And then like the same thing we set up with CTS. So this would be an example of the proposal page for CTS. Oh, since I just have to log in again because I log into the other, but we have like 7 proposals that have been ratified or open and some submitted so far. And then like this is how the Slack channel looks like, where for the Network First Manifesto, you see that we create different project channels and members join and work on them on a regular basis. And now we're doing the same for the CTS workspace. We're setting up these projects, and that's basically how the setup look like. And then in terms of organizational network analysis, this would be an example of active ONA. Typically, we would show these basically in network first context without showing the names. This is fake data, so we can show the names. But this is a typical ONA network. You see where each node is an employee, and some of them are more influential than others. When I drag one, I can see in a very interactive manner how they interact with each other. And they have different influence categories in this context: central, intermediary, and peripheral, based on the percentiles they occupy for different interaction types, like sharing information, technical support, personal support, or inspiration. So they go to a survey, they nominate their peers based on these interactions, and then we can map this network. And this is an alternative way to the traditional hierarchy view, which can also be visualized here, right? It's more organic and it's more focused on social capital versus human capital. But it's really a combination of both that is the most optimal outcome. I wanted to show an example on how generative AI and agentic AI can interact with this type of network approach. Because again, there are some companies like Odilon or CTS, they implement both the HC framework and the ONA component. Some of them do only ONA. There are companies that have different level of maturity, but there is a lot of potential when it comes to integrating AI and network framework. So for example, here with generative AI, we can ask, who are the top 3 employees in terms of influence, and how can I leverage them? Okay, so then basically the AI would parse the network results as well as any other HR metrics that we might have fed the system in the background, like department, engagement, role, skills, etc. And we're replying to the prompt. It highlights these people in the network as well as in the ranking and explain how these people can be leveraged for specific purposes. Sometimes these informal leaders are leveraged as change agents of strategic initiatives. For example, when implementing agile methodologies, they can be agile champions. When implementing ERPs, they can be ERP super users. Or when implementing a cultural change, they can be cultural ambassadors or even become brand ambassadors outside of the company. And we can also use these informal leaders to enhance the identification of high potential employees in leadership development programs and succession planning initiatives. Our research at CTS shows that only two-thirds of high-performing employees are not recognized as informal leaders by their peers. So if you make sure in a leadership development program that is informal leaders and or these high potential employees are simultaneously informal leaders and high-performing employees, you can change the leadership pipeline by up to 70%. And by engaging informal leaders as early adopters, you can improve change adoption by up to 70% as well. Then another interesting use case is onboarding, where we can match informal leaders as buddies of new hires to shorten their time to productivity. An example on how we could combine this with agentic AI would be this mentorship matcher AI agent, where basically the agent would identify macro interventions across the organization that need to be approved by the HR team on a case-by-case basis. And then once an intervention is approved, the AI will automatically notify the first line manager via email, will gather the consent of the mentor and the mentee. Once the mentor and the mentee have gathered the consent have provided the consent via email, the AI will make a email introduction between the mentor and the mentee, and then we'll gather their feedback to make sure that the mentorship opportunity took place. So that way we can shorten the time to productivity of new hires by up to 40%. And then like on the passive O&A side, I show you an example earlier about Slack, although I don't know if it was visualized or not. But then like this would be an example of passive O&A based on Microsoft email metadata. Typically, when we do passive O&A, we don't show names of employees or any other identifiable information. We do not analyze the content of the communications, but we do analyze metadata at aggregate level. So we can look at email sent, email received, response time, meetings attended, burnout risk, and look into use cases like collaborative overload or cross-team collaboration, onboarding insights to see how long it takes for a certain new hire to reach an optimal level of productivity, and managerial effectiveness to understand how managers are having one-on-one with their team members on a regular basis, if they're engaging in micromanagement or not. And we can also monitor well-being signals like after-hour collaboration load and other metrics. So you see basically like we're going towards a future of work where organizations can be decentralized networks where agentic AI is running micro interventions on a regular basis, and where people can gather based on areas of interest, people that resonate with them, and having ultimately we had to boil down the essence of network first to a few words. I would say network first is about starting with the human connection first, starting with the community first, and the outcome second, right? So first, we make sure that we are working on something that we are interested in, we're passionate about, and that we have a group of people that resonate with us, with our vision, right? And then basically the outcomes start being a consequence of that activity, right? Whereas in traditional organizations or traditional approaches, whether it is an early stage startup or a large multinational, typically like work happens in a very centralized and rigid way where people are told exactly what they have to work on, who they have to work with, when they have to work, where they have to work. And sometimes that can limit creativity and productivity and engagement, right? So the idea is like, how can we find a healthy level between centralization and decentralization in a way that is scalable and that can enhance our human experience, especially with the advent of AI technologies. And I'll pause it there, but I would love to open for the last 7 minutes, a Q&A section. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and share their impressions, their feedback, or if you have any questions, feel free to kind of like share them on the chat or unmute yourself and share it with us. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And I see that we have actually a few members from the Network First Manifesto, Jaya and Nat and others. So if also you want to unmute yourself and share your experience with the community, that would be great as well.
Francisco, is it okay if I say a few words?
Of course, please go ahead, Charlie. Thank you.
Hey, Charlie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks, Wael, for sending me out the link for this. And first, just to recognize that Wael, who I know quite well, for a period of time that I spent in Doha before in 2025, 26, is just really, really good at this networking, very unselfish with his time and bringing people together. So thanks for that. I think the last piece there from Francisco was really, really good when you spoke about the power of connecting first, coming together first, meeting up, building relationships. That is about people. It's about that human connection. It's not about looking at what can I get out of this, that comes as a consequence. So it's human connection first and work-related benefit well down the line. If we try too hard to force things in network arrangements, it tends not to work when we tend to let it flow naturally and build a relationship with the person. So my service is customer experience based in Ireland, but we're doing work into the European Union. I'm also involved in the European Union Pact for Skills. I've just finished a term with MIT in a global initiative looking at skills of the future, but in particular human skills. And because of that, we created a concept. It's not a building, but a concept of a Human Skills Institute on the belief through the study that 50 to 60% of the skills of the future are going to be human skills, not digital skills. The AI and the digital will be there'll be enhancements of those human skills. But what's happening is, and I think we all agree with this, is there's a race for AI strategy. And as somebody said here in Dublin at a conference a few weeks ago, culture still eats AI strategy for breakfast. And that thing of the internal customer service, the experience within the employee experience is still to the fore, regardless, of the pace of change and the digital disruption. So, I think this is a fantastic opportunity. Not only is it a strong network, but it talks to that very problem or the issue, potential problem, but bigger than that, the potential opportunity, because it's not human skills versus AI, it's human skills with AI and using both of those in a responsible way. So I'm really excited about, what I've heard here, and I can't wait to join up once you guys are gone in a few minutes' time.
Of course, Charlie, you're welcome to join. You can find the link on the chat. Actually, the mention you did about the MIT remind me of something I should have shared. Is actually as part of the Network First company pilot, the Network First Manifesto had a partnership with Cornell University. So Cornell is sending basically a series of people to help us document these first case studies. And the same way, for example, that with the agile methodology, the collaboration with universities like MIT or Cambridge was very critical in making it mainstream. Or in the case of design thinking, also the involvement of Stanford University, right? We have this strong collaboration with Cambridge. There is also now a researcher from the University of Puerto Rico that is going to be involved. We're having conversations with different universities here in the United States and abroad, but it's also an opportunity basically to engage academic institutions. I see that you turn on the camera, so we'd love for you to share your experience with the community so far. You being a super active member, I think your perspective will be super useful for the group.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an absolute joy actually to meet all these very intelligent bunch of people, and I've been involved with IBM as well for a few years. I went to Wimbledon a couple of times. I was there when they created this photo. I don't know if you can see it because I've got my light there, but this photo's created from 8,600 pictures that are all totally different. And it's actually a Wimbledon pitch, right? And that was, let me see, that was 2018. So it shows you how far we've actually come right now. And I'm trying to make sense of it all like everybody else. I think anybody that says they've made sense of it all probably hasn't been using Claude Cowork or any of these tools, right? And we're at a point now where it is a bit like the Wild West, frankly. And so I'm really pleased to have a whole new bunch of people that I trust at Network First Manifesto, and I'm actually launching a new podcast show which will support the current podcasting that I'm doing, and we're going to talk a lot about the future of work, and that's quite exciting. So I'm recording some interviews at the moment with all the project catalysts, and after that has actually finished, that series probably be 8 to 10 interviews. Then that will progress to interviewing lots of other people, because there's no hierarchy, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to be retentive and interview catalyst. It was just a nice way to kind of explain what on earth we're doing there, because it is a bit off the wall. Unless you're a forward thinker, and I found everybody is just really forward thinking, and that's another reason that I've joined it, really. So yeah, enough from me. I could waffle on for ages about
Nat.
this.
I think your experience is super relevant because Nat had previous experience doing podcasts, right? But when he launched the Network First podcast project, which he submitted as a proposal, it got ratified. He had a group of basically 6-7 members that join on a regular basis, and help him basically set up for the Network First Manifesto podcast. set up the messaging, the banner, the structure, the idea. So it is a much more interesting experience doing it part of a community as doing it in isolation or just hiring freelancers or employees, right? I know Jaya also wanted to share their experience, and we are already at the top of the time, so we have to be very quick. But Jaya, if you want to very quickly share your experience as well.
And we got a comment, sorry, Jaya, from somebody in the chat with Dr. Sharif as well. I think we'll try and get to also as well. So
perfect.
Sure. Yeah, I'll make it really short. I just wanted to share with everyone, what I found. Definitely, Network Manifesto opened my eyes. I'm a HR practitioner for about 25 years. And when I joined Network First Manifesto, it really opened my eyes. And I thought, why didn't I find this much earlier? So if you're like me, an HR person, definitely, I highly recommend you to join this organization because like me, I hope it opens your eyes. And I really resonated with what Wael said earlier about trust, relationship, and so on. And you'll find that here. And for me, as a HR person, of course, I've did find that in my working environment. However, the true trust and relationship I could build here, I felt like if I was more free to do that here and without having to worry about protocols and this and that, but truly thinking about the organization's best and also truly having the collaborative freedom. So that's been my experience, and I highly recommend and encourage a lot of people, you, if you're interested in finding what I found. So that's all.
Thank you, Jaya, and thank you for all your contribution to the community. Let's answer the comment from Dr. Sharif, right? And we can wrap up the session. So the comment is, thanks for the interesting O&A work you discussed. I wonder what aspect of connection quality could be observed, measured in organizations, given that the quantity of connections and or their frequency may not necessarily be a representation of their quality. Very good question, Dr. Sharif. So here, typically, we advocate for a combination of active and passive O&A, because with active O&A, you can basically categorize these interactions in interactions like sharing information, technical support, personal support, and inspiration. So we can see if somebody is influential or if, in a way, for example, if they check several boxes. Maybe a person is working in a help desk role and they have a lot of technical support, but if that person doesn't inspire or share information with their peers, it's not recognized as an informal leader. On the passive O&A side, when we analyze interactions between two departments, for example, we can see how reciprocal they are. If they are taking place within working hours or outside working hours, how they compare with the average of the industry or the average of the company itself. And that contextualization is very, very important, right? Because if you see, for example, Department A and Department B exchange 50 emails per month, that doesn't mean anything by itself. The relevant insight there is like, is this level of collaboration like 50% higher than what we see between other departments? Has this level of collaboration increased or decreased within the last 3 months? Do we see a situation where, for example, we're interacting with a client that is, we're paying a lot of attention to a client that is not generating a lot of revenue, but we have another client that is much more strategic, where we have much longer response time, and we are not having that common exchange? Or what's the level? What are the best practices, for example, in terms of collaboration that lead to a department having a certain level of performance versus others? Are the departments that are working in silos? So the contextualization and the nuances in removing that noise from the information about collaboration are just as important as the data itself, right? And this is something that, it's an emerging practice, and there is also years of literature that we're incorporating, and now with AI, it brings it to a completely different level of actionability. I hope that answers your questions. But with that, thank you everyone for joining today. We're gonna wrap up the session. Thanks, Wael, for joining us, well, for facilitating this with me today. And again, you have the link. You're more than welcome to join the Network First Manifesto. We'll share the recording with those that could not join, and looking forward to keeping in touch and exploring opportunities to work together. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you all for being here, please, and reach out to us for further connections and questions, and it'd be great to connect with you further on this anytime.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.